here we are, watching the second Hollywood adaptation of a major Stephen King novel in 2017. Hopefully for King, it's second time lucky. This time we have an adaptation of King's infamously scary 1986 novel It, the story of a group of childhood friends who both as children and adults must face their fears and rid the haunted small town of Derry, Maine of the dreaded evil clown Pennywise. A novel that in many ways single-handedly instilled a significant number of the population around us with a genuine fear of clowns. Stephen King can take pride in the fact that his novel's monster has been baked into public consciousness enough over the past 30 years that today it's almost impossible for us to see the average clown as anything other than evil. Because It 2017 has such a strong antagonist, I was already convinced when walking into the screening that I was going to be somewhat scared of the experience. Because based on the trailer and the marketing for the movie, many of us could already tell that the way the filmmakers have portrayed Pennywise is extremely effective. With Pennywise played gleefully and almost childishly by 27-year-old Bill Skarsgård, who also happens to be the son of actor Stellan Skarsgård, I had no doubt that it would bring some chills, some successful jump scares, a few loud whacks and bangs and so forth. What I wasn't expecting was how much I would end up caring for these lead characters. What we really have with the 2017 version of It is essentially The Goonies, but with added hardcore horror elements, and no doubt these elements are definitely scary, but they're also bizarre and at times even genuinely funny. Focusing on only the childhood flashbacks of Stephen King's novel, It 2017 follows a group of social misfits called the Losers Club, a group of young boys and one girl who are living in the worst kind of childhood imaginable in their small and sinister town of Derry, Maine. When not being beat up at school by a gang of older teenagers or dealing with either abusive or negligent or overbearing parents, they are also dealing with this supernatural entity, an evil clown that has a long history of killing people in a multitude of horrible ways going back many years. But the truth is that It is so much more better than it has any right to be. The movie is exceptional at making you feel genuine empathy for these kids. The wonderful surprise of the movie is that, like The Goonies or like Stephen King's previous Stand By Me adaptation, you really care about the welfare of these kids because so much of their small town existence is relatable. With Derry, Maine having such a sense of place in the novel, it's recreated brilliantly on the screen with a real authenticity. Seeing our lead actors ride their bikes down the town's main street on a sunny day contrasts fantastically with the fact that we know these kids will likely go to hell and back by the movie's end. And because of this, there's a real palpable sense of dread as these characters you like will have to tackle true evil single-handedly without the help of the adults around them. This is because none of the adults in their lives believe their fears are actually true, and it just isolates all these kids in a completely living nightmare. It's so easy because of this to feel sympathetic for them. And yet they're also strong characters as well. They completely demand your respect because they're going to try and tackle this force of nature on their own. This sense of shared dread among all the Losers Club creates an amazing camaraderie between all the young actors that never rings false. Throughout the movie, they're cracking jokes, they curse, they fight, but above all, they always feel like a group of real friends who really know each other.
My grandfather thinks this town is cursed. He says that all the bad things that happen in this town are because of one thing, an evil thing that feeds off the people of Derry.
But it can't be one thing. We all saw something different.
Maybe. Or maybe it knows what scares us most, and that's what we see.
I saw a leper. He was like a walking infection.
But you didn't. Because it isn't real. None of this is. None of this makes any sense. They're all like bad dreams.
I don't think so. I know the difference between a bad dream and real life, okay? We're all afraid of something.
Got that right. Why, Rich? What are you afraid of? Clowns.
I honestly couldn't tell you the last time I looked at a group of child actors and really cared about what they were doing. It has been such a long time since I actually believed they were really friends and actually knew each other. Make no mistake, the reason It 2017 works so well is because you care about what the hell is going on. In a lot of horror movies, you're simply waiting for the next scare to come along, when in fact, with It 2017, you're actually enjoying the relief from the scares because those individual scenes of character are so interesting. And then when the scares do arrive, they hit you like a bullet. Setting the movie in the 80s instead of the 50s as it is in the book is also really clever, because so many of the 30-somethings that'll be seeing the movie this weekend will instantly relate to this 80s time period because they grew up in it. I should also say that nearly all of the movie takes place during the daytime, which is just utterly wonderful because it forces the filmmakers to not just use cheap tricks like nighttime, lack of colour, cheesy pathetic fallacy to create fear. They must create horror during a summer's day in Maine, which is no mean feat. It reminds me of The Exorcist in that way. It's a horror movie that's not afraid to set a lot of its scenes during the daytime and give the audience moments of relief between the horror, which is something that makes the horror all the more effective. Pennywise the clown, of course, must also be terrifying, and there are at least half a dozen scenes where his actions will really disturb you. Knowing as little as possible is best, so I'll keep this spoiler free, but it's good to know that the filmmakers aren't afraid to have their horror scenes be both scary and almost a little goofy at the same time. As much as Pennywise is disturbing, he is also a little silly, a little funny, a little weird. Director Andreas Muschietti uses all of this to his advantage. As much as It 2017 is scary, it also allowed me to have a great deal of fun while being scared, something I can't say about our current generation of horror movies. If anything, It 2017 is a direct antidote to the modern torture porn horror of modern Hollywood. It's honestly such a breath of fresh air to watch a brilliantly fun and absolutely scary horror movie as opposed to the endless torture of Saw sequels and the relentlessly bleak horror movies of the past 15 years. For all of its terror, It 2017 never forgoes a sense of hope and fun. There's been such a relentless nihilism in modern horror, everything just feels utterly hopeless most of the time, but thankfully It 2017 keeps you both scared and hopeful, providing just enough relief from the horror that the horror itself is more effective. Ultimately, if you try to scare an audience too much, they will just switch off. You care too much about these kids to let that happen.